What happens when the unimaginable erupts, catching the world completely off guard? At dawn in the Donbas, an oppressive silence lay over the land. Without warning, Russian forces launched a massive, coordinated attack that pierced defensive lines believed to be unbreakable. These fortifications, symbols of endurance for years, fell within hours, shocking both defenders and civilians. Almost simultaneously, Moscow annulled a treaty that had preserved even the faintest hope of dialogue. The news resounded from Kyiv to Washington, triggering panic in global capitals and a flurry of urgent negotiations. Experts immediately called it a turning point, a moment that could not just redraw borders, but alter the logic of the entire conflict. Now the stakes reach far beyond the battlefield. This is not just the next phase, it is a rupture in the foundations of global security. Miss this moment, and you risk being blindsided by shifting powers, uncertain stability, and the spark of the world's next crisis. To truly understand what is at stake, we need to return to that fateful morning when everything changed. Hours before the assault, anxiety simmered beneath a fragile calm. Only by tracing the first cracks in the silence can we grasp the forces now unleashed. For months, the world clung to the security of Zelensky bunkers and the invisible shield of diplomatic red lines drawn generations ago. In the Donbas, these underground fortresses stood as more than concrete. They were icons of endurance, built to survive weeks of shelling and to shelter desperate lives beneath layers considered nearly invincible. Both Russian and Ukrainian forces trusted these defenses as the ultimate boundary. Historical treaties, seldom mentioned but ever present, discreetly kept escalation in check, making chaos feel at least controllable. Civilians settled into uneasy routines. Sirens wailed through gray mornings, families crowded into cellars, yet a stubborn faith lingered. Some lines, steel, stone, or signed on paper, would hold. Children trudged to school. Shops opened. Life bent, but did not break. Yet beneath every heartbeat was a lingering question. What if those limits were illusions? If bunkers fell and agreements dissolved, everything people trusted for safety, all certainty about where war could reach, would vanish in an instant. At sunrise, that nightmare became reality. Barriers deemed unbreakable began to crumble, live before the watching world. Now the rules of survival would be rewritten in real time. No one, soldier, civilian, or leader, could predict what the day would bring. Suddenly, the battle was not just about territory, but about the very fabric of reality. As dawn broke over the Donbas, Russian forces unleashed a multi-pronged assault. Artillery thundered, drones circled, warplanes screamed, and shock troops surged. In a relentless wave, the offensive shattered not only trenches, but also the infamous bunkers, fortifications once thought impenetrable. The ground shook as reinforced shelters collapsed under relentless bombardment, clearing the way for armored columns. What had been a static front turned into chaos, movement everywhere, confusion mounting, fear spreading fast. For Ukrainian soldiers and civilians, the illusion of safe lines and reliable defenses dissolved within hours. Yet the military onslaught was only the beginning. Almost at the same time, Moscow declared it was nullifying a major Cold War-era treaty, a pact that had quietly restrained the worst outcomes. With a single announcement, decades of diplomatic guardrails vanished, warning Kyiv and the world that the old order was finished. In Kyiv, leaders scrambled to interpret the signal. Was this a threat, a dare, or the opening move in something even more dangerous? Across Ukraine, communications flickered, supply lines faltered, and all sense of security unraveled. Civilians packed into bomb shelters, rumors and dread flooded the airwaves, and the meaning of safety itself began to fade. Military and political shocks now amplified one another. In one night, the war's landscape and the world's stability shifted dramatically. With old rules erased, what new threats and choices confront Ukraine and everyone else? As the first shockwaves settled, a second crisis emerged, less visible but equally dangerous. The information battlefield was about to ignite. When certainty collapses, panic fills the void. News of the Donbas defenses falling spreads quickly, far beyond the front. In cities once thought safe, civilians sense the ground shifting beneath their feet. Fear spreads, questions multiply, and no one feels immune from the next blow. Governments across Europe rush into emergency talks. Some leaders demand harsher sanctions, hoping to shift momentum. Others fear that pushing harder could trigger uncontrollable chaos. In America, officials recalculate risks behind closed doors, aware that a broken treaty marks the end of the old order. Even distant decisions now threaten to rebound in unforeseeable ways. From Beijing, China calls for calm and dialogue, but its words are drowned out by the storm. The information war becomes a contest of nerves. Shaky videos and unverified rumors race across screens, fueling confusion. Online, fact and fiction merge, accelerating the sense of crisis. With each update, anxiety deepens. No one is sure what is real, only that the stakes are rising. Military analysts warn, this is a tipping point. One misstep, on the battlefield, in a speech, or even viral online, could trigger consequences that ripple far beyond Ukraine, shaking the pillars of global security. To ignore these dangers is to stay blind as the world changes faster than any government can react. If old playbooks have failed, what hope remains for those seeking stability in this new, unstable era? The old boundaries may have blurred, but choices still demand to be made. As uncertainty grows, every decision carries more weight. In a world where the ground can shift beneath your feet overnight, how do you keep your balance? When events accelerate, it is dangerously easy to be swept away by the spectacle. The first rule is simple but crucial. Think critically. Trust but verify. No single journalist or authority holds the full truth. Especially when the noise is loudest, cross-check every claim. Information is a weapon. Every side uses news, images, and even silence to shape morale and perception. If you accept only one narrative, you risk missing vital truths. Treaties and fortifications, however solid, last only as long as the realities beneath them. A signature, a border, these can vanish if the ground shifts. The fall of both a decades-old treaty and supposedly unbreakable defenses proves nothing is permanent in such storms. Prepare for volatility. Surprises are the new normal. The facts you trust today may be overturned tomorrow, so keep your thinking flexible. Do not anchor yourself to yesterday's assumptions. Without these habits, panic and manipulation become traps. The world's balance has never been more fragile, and those blind to change risk being left behind. After such upheaval, clarity and calm are rare, but more essential than ever. How can civilians, leaders, and bystanders rebuild their sense of direction amid chaos? To answer that, we must look at how people on the ground adapt, and what lessons arise from their response. The search for stability starts with the smallest acts of resilience. The endgame remains shrouded, but your understanding determines what you see through the haze. Tonight, the world watches lines collapse, on war maps and at negotiation tables. The rules that once created order have disappeared almost overnight. This is not just another historical moment. It is the unraveling of assumptions that held global security together. If you only skim the headlines, you risk missing the deeper shifts that will define the next decade. Passive watching means surrendering your power, not just to understand events, but to see how they will shape your future. It is easy to turn away when the news grows heavy, when fear creeps in, or when each update feels like another blow to normalcy. But these are moments that demand more than anxious scrolling. They demand focus, skepticism, and the resolve to question what is signal and what is noise. Your job is not to absorb fear, but to track the shifts, spotting patterns that headlines blur, asking why choices are made, and refusing to let panic cloud your thinking. The collapse of military and diplomatic boundaries is not the end. It is the beginning of an era ruled by information, perspective, and the choices you make. Now, your insight is your shield and your compass. Do not let the fog of war or broken treaties blind you. Watch closely. Stay sharp. Remember, the outcome is not decided by soldiers and leaders alone, but by everyone willing to look beneath the surface.